Mafia. And so if you're running a stripper club, there's a good chance that you got the franchise through organized crime. And, you know, for those who have attempted, like here in Atlanta, we had some who attempted to open clubs without getting the franchise, and they woke up to the phone call that your place has just been bombed. So, you know, it's understand this is the underworld. And, you know, many of those places like stripper clubs, sex stores, you know, the peep shows, all of that kind of stuff is often used for money laundering. You can watch some of these plays and you won't see anybody go in and out, but they are making money. What they're doing is, you know, laundering money is what they're doing. So they show it as people came in and bought X amount of magazines for this amount of cash. And so we now take that money that was dirty and it now becomes clean money. Anyway, so and Jack Ruby is known to have been associated with organized crime figures, the Campeses in Dallas, who were associated with Carlos Marcello out of New Orleans. You know, Ruby was probably not a made member. He was an associate. To be a made member, you got to do that bloodletting routine. And so he's associated with these people. Now, it's important to understand that the people who operate within this environment, you know, often fall within the category of psychopath. Psychopath means that they have no morals, they have no compassion for other human beings. We call them thrill junkies. They'll do anything for a thrill. They do not go along with whatever the rules are in anything. And so this is the world that Jack Ruby comes from. Now, what we're told is that Jack Ruby was distraught, having watched Jackie Kennedy grieve the murder of her husband, and that Jack Ruby was so motivated by this, his patriotism, his compassion for Jackie Kennedy was such that he could not stop himself from killing Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, so in the videos I want to show today, I had first had a shorter clip that I was going to show, but I decided to expand it because I think this is a pretty good one that really captures this one is just first an intro, then I'm going to go into one that is a longer version of Jack Ruby. But first, let's take a look at the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald.
I don't know what this is all about.
You killed the president?
No, sir, I didn't. People
How'd you
keep
get the
asking me that.
black eye?
Sir?
Did you shoot the president?
I work in that building.
Were you in the building at the time?
Naturally, if I work in that building, yes, sir.
Back up, man. Did you shoot the president?
No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union.
What time did you leave?
I'm just a patsy.
The president?
Around midnight on November 22nd, Oswald was paraded in front of the press. He had just been charged with the murder of Officer Tippit, and he was about to be charged with the assassination of President Kennedy.
You killed the president? No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been. Nobody said what?
Sir?
Nobody said what?
At the back of the room that night was one man who was not a policeman or a reporter. A man who carried a gun and had underworld connections. His name was Jacob Rubenstein, known as Jack Ruby. In less than 36 hours, he would murder Lee Harvey Oswald.
If the mob had a hand...
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to point this out. I suggested you put yourself in different, try to view this from different roles as opposed to just, the broad public looking at these events, but to try to look at it through the eyes of a detective or the eyes of a security person. Mind you, within a police operation, that you have a suspect accused of murdering the president of the United States. Forget even killing the president of the United States, suspect in anything. And you're going to parade this person in front of a whole bunch of strangers. And mind you, you would have to think there would be a chance that somebody might want to kill him, because murder of a president, this could be a big plot. People behind it might want to kill the person who did the killing. So, most normal everyday people might not be thinking about this, but if this is your world, security, police operations, all of that, these are thoughts that ought to be fundamental. And to have a known organized crime person in your facility at the time you're moving him, to me, is pretty bizarre.
And in the president's death, and I think they did. And they induced Oswald to kill the president. It was terribly important that he be silenced, because eventually Oswald, if alive, would testify as to who his associates were, or they ran the risk that he would. And therefore, there's every indication that Ruby stalked and killed Oswald in an effort to silence him.
Jack Ruby was a police informer who owned a striptease club. He made sure that policemen who came to his club were shown a good time.
What kind of a guy was Jack Ruby? Impulsive. He had a quick temper. That's why they called him Sparky. Loved to fight. And if anybody was really out of line, he'd throw him out.
If Jack Ruby knew that you were a law enforcement officer, they always had plenty of liquor, dancing girls, food, or anything else, because he always thought that we may be able to help him.
Yeah, he did give some free drinks around, and of course when the police went down there, he discounted the drinks to them, and he was a fighter. There's no question about that. When we'd get a disturbance call down there, we'd just wait at the bottom of the stairs, because just a few minutes, that guy or whoever was creating the disturbance was going to come falling down the stairs.
Again, I'm sorry for interrupting, but just to make note, yeah, Jack Ruby would, provide liquor, food, women, because he thought, we might be able to help him. You're a cop, for God's sakes. I mean, that's called, you're being corrupted in that process. That's right, we might be able to do something for him.
Ruby was also acquainted with leading figures in the Dallas underworld, including Sam and Joe Campisi.
Yes, Jack knew the Campises, and I've seen them together on numerous occasions. Jack ate out there at the Egyptian lounge, and he'd come in, they'd shake his hand and sit down, and sometimes Joe Campisi would sit with him, and if I came in, well, I'd sit with Jack Ruby and Joe Campisi. We all knew each other well.
The Campisis were lieutenants of Carlos Marcello, the Mafia boss who had reportedly talked of killing the president.
The Campisis did know Carlos Marcello, because one day I was in Joe Campisi's office, and he called Carlos on the phone, and I talked to Carlos on the phone.
If Ruby was a hitman working for the Mafia, he had already missed one perfect opportunity to silence Oswald.
And I asked him if he was packing a pistol at that midnight press conference, and he said yes. And I said, then why didn't you plug him then? And he says, I was afraid of hitting one of you guys.
Ruby spent much of Saturday hanging around Dallas Police Headquarters. That day, Oswald was taken from his cell several times to be interrogated and made to stand in police lineups. Ruby had no opportunity to shoot Oswald, but he was asking lots of questions about when the police would transfer him to the county jail.
Photograph in the feature, now they're figuring a lineup among these men, Mafia will be kicked out. Right?
If Ruby was stalking Oswald, Sunday morning would be his last chance. The police had announced Oswald would be transferred to the county jail at 10 a.m. But at 10, Jack Ruby was still at home.
Jack Ruby takes over an hour and a half to leave his apartment. He very leisurely goes to the Western Union office. He doesn't appear to be rushed, says the clerk behind the counter, and he sends his $25 MoneyGram. He takes his change, and it's time-stamped at 11:17. Oswald is shot by Ruby 4 minutes later at 11:21.
I did a recheck on that myself from the date stamp time of 11:17 on that telegram, and then it took roughly 83 seconds because I walked at 3 different speeds, slow, fast, and medium, and the average was 83 seconds from the front door of the Western Union to the basement.
It is still unclear whether Ruby slipped into the basement through an unlocked door or just walked down the ramp. Upstairs, Jim Lavelle was about to bring Oswald down in the elevator, more than an hour late.
Well, I had no idea when I was coming down the elevator, and he certainly could not have. And there was no way you could time that to where he would be in the basement right at the exact moment that I came out of there. And he couldn't have been there more than a minute to 45 seconds to a minute before I arrived. But Oswald.
Wearing a light-colored suit and a Stetson, Lavelle was Oswald's escort.
I put the handcuffs on him, and in the process of doing that, I more in jest kind of said, "Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are," meaning, of course, that they'd hit him and not me. And he kind of laughed, and he said, "Oh, you're being melodramatic," or something to that effect. "Nobody's going to shoot at me." And so we walked out, and I was momentarily blinded by those lights. I couldn't see anything. Oswald just groaned when he was shot, just and went down, and that's the only sound he made.
As Ruby lunged forward and fired his gun, he yelled, "You killed my president, you rat." And later, as the police escort tackled him and led him away, "I'm happy that I got him." Was the shooting in the basement garage a carefully planned Mafia hit? Or did Sparky Ruby shoot Oswald in a flash of violent rage?
I transferred Jack Ruby to the county jail, and when I asked him why he'd done the shooting, he said he'd thought about it from the Friday night on, but a lot of people thought about it. I've had people tell me, "Oh, if I could got to him on Friday afternoon, my anger was such that I would have killed him without looking back."
I visited Jack in prison. The first thing he said, he was smiling at the time, you know, and he looked at me and he said, "I got balls, ain't I, baby?" And I said, "Yeah, Jack, and they gonna hang you by them too."
Ruby would die in prison from natural causes.
So now I want to look at the more extended look at Jack Ruby and the murder.
Yeah, he's got to be. There he is. There he is. Here he comes. Now the prisoner wearing a black sweater. He's changed from his T-shirt.
There is Lee Oswald. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. It's absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives have their guns drawn. Oswald has been shot. There is no question about it. Oswald has been shot. Pandemonium has broken loose
Here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters has been shot.
All right, I'm going outside.
Now, whether
Someone down on the floor over there? Is there someone injured down on the floor? A detective put his hand up on his forehead, shaking it. Oh, no, this has happened.
I saw him there. He was in the group of men right here.
Masquerading as one of us or what?
I thought he was one of the detectives. You know, he had a hat and Stucky was well dressed. That's what I remember.
All right, now that's the situation here at Dallas Police Headquarters in the basement. We're in this story which has been so unreal from the very beginning.
The man who saw the shot fired said it was fired by a man wearing a black hat.
What? What is? Is this definite?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. We saw it. We saw a man lunge for a...
Here comes the ambulance. The ambulance is being pulled up in front of us here.
It is almost unbelievable. Fired, one shot, almost.
Here, someone has...
Please, get back. Back. Okay. Pat, can you move?
Okay. Pat, move just a little to your left.
We can see now that police are hemming off newsmen in the basement of Dallas City Hall, hemming them off.
The only word so far is that the shot came from a man wearing a black hat and a coat. Here comes Oswald. He is ashen and unconscious at this time, now being moved in. He's not moving. He's in the police are quickly climbing in. They're now having to remove the armored truck.
Captain, where will he be?
This is the armored truck on the outside of the Dallas Police Department. It's being moved out onto Commerce Street, and now the ambulance is coming out. The ambulance with Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shot just a few minutes ago.
The ambulance is leaving Dallas Police Headquarters. Dallas Police say they do have a man.
Yeah, and the report is also that it's a man in a black hat. That's all the information we have. Black hat? Black hat.
This sad day is a beautiful day here in Washington. Bright, sunshiny.
He had a wound in his lower left abdomen. He was unconscious inside? Yes, he was.
Does he look like he's dying?
I wouldn't want to say.
Who shot him? Man in a black hat. Huh? Man in a black hat. Did they catch him? Well, a police officer shot him. No, a man in a black hat shot him.
Here outside of the courthouse, this crowd, when word flashed through the crowd that Oswald had been shot, broke out into a cheer.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, leaving the White House for the last time.
What's your reaction to hearing that suspect Oswald has been shot down?
Well, I think he should have been tried, but people sometimes take the law in their own hands on a thing like this.
Well, I think he got what he deserved if he's the one that did it.
As you can see, a crowd genuinely not very sorry that Oswald has been the victim of an assassin himself. The scene here of anticipation has quieted now, and the scene is much different.
At least we think that's what happened. run out of voice.
Hold it quiet.
Okay, is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Dr. Tom Shires, Chief of Surgery at Parkland Memorial Hospital and Southwestern Medical School, advises me that Lee Oswald is currently undergoing surgery for a single gunshot wound that entered on his left side and did not exit. The patient is in extremely critical condition.
The man who shot Lee Oswald has been identified as Jack Ruby, R-U-B-Y. He runs a place in Dallas called the Carousel Club, which is a kind of a strip joint and nightclub. He's been seen around the City Hall for the last 2 days, and he was even handing out cards offering free drinks to reporters yesterday. They have Ruby downstairs now in jail. No statement forthcoming so far from the police department.
What sort of a person is Jack Ruby?
I understand that he was here passing out cards yesterday to members of the press, offering them to come by and get free drinks at his clubs.
That's what I understand, yes.
Well, how does he have access to the police department, the nightclub owner in Dallas? How does he, I saw him walking around downstairs. How does he do this? Do you have a lot of friends in the police department?
Well, I would think so. I don't know.
Reporters are now questioning C.A. Droby, the man who has been legal counsel in the past for Lee Harold, that is for Jack Ruby, the man who is now accused of shooting Lee Harold Oswald. C.A. Droby, now down the hall from us here in Dallas City Hall, being questioned by reporters. This is Bob Huppiker.
They're not going to bring Ruby down there, obviously, but they are going to make a statement, apparently, by the chief. I think we better break this camera out of here and head for the basement.
Now, remember, Chief Curry was under a lot of pressure before Kennedy came to Dallas. He had the incident with Adlai Stevenson. He was apprehensive about the Kennedy affair coming his way. He said, we're going to show that we have things under control. And when things are not under control and the president is killed, Curry is under great pressure. We've got to show the world that we have a legitimate police department here, and we're going to apprehend the suspect. Now, again, as somebody who's planning an assassination, I know that he's under that pressure, and I want to use that to my advantage. I want to make sure that he gets what he wants, a suspect that he can say, you see, we got it, case closed. And understand, if I'm an assassination planner, the person I want to hand over a suspect because I want them to close the case. But I don't want them to have anybody who has any connection to anything. So I'm going to pick somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with the event. And I'm going to, I'll plant evidence. I'll have all that, organized so that they can conclude their investigation very quickly. And as we go on, you're going to hear about the FBI concluded its investigation in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. Now, also, I want you to think about it from the standpoint of being a law enforcement person. The murder of Lee Harvey Oswald has organized crime hit written all over it. If you're a cop and that's not what you're thinking, you ought not to be a cop.
Now let's be quiet.
My statement will be very brief. Oswald expired at 1:07 p.m. He died at 1:07 p.m. We have arrested the man. The man will be charged with murder.
Who is he?
The suspect's name is Jack Rubenstein, I believe. He goes by the name of Jack Ruby. That's all I have to say.
Let's look at a kinescope slow-motion replay of the murder as captured by CBS television cameras. Police officers close in quickly, but the fatal shot has been fired. A shooting which forever sealed his lips and may have prevented police from ever getting the full story of what was behind the assassination of the President of the United States.
In Dallas, with Lee Oswald, the man accused of assassinating President Kennedy, dead, the big question now is, what kind of man shot Lee Oswald, and why? We have in the studios of our affiliate station KRLD TV here in Dallas, Bill DeMar, who is a nightclub MC, a comedian by profession. Bill worked in the nightclub owned by Jack Ruby. Do you know anything about Jack Rubenstein's political philosophies?
No, he never spoke about anything when we go for breakfast afterwards or anything. The only thing he talked about was business.
Did you ever hear him say anything about President Kennedy?
Never.
Do you know Lee Oswald? Have you ever seen him?
To my knowledge, if I recollect correctly, I saw him in the audience last week.
Lee Oswald in the audience at
Yes.
the club, at the Carousel
Yes.
Club, which is owned by Jack Rubenstein?
Yes.
Did Jack Rubenstein speak with Oswald, to your knowledge?
No, I didn't see him. I don't think Jack even knew he was in there.
You don't think Rubenstein knew that Oswald was in the club? It's such a strange coincidence that he would be in the club. Do you think it possible that Rubenstein knew him?
I don't think so. I don't know for sure.
He is the accused, Jack Ruby. They're making room for him now as he's coming down this hall, which is also familiar to all of us. He's looking down. He is handcuffed. He's going to be taken upstairs to the jail. They've opened the door, and he's going to the jail elevator.
Jetta, how long did you know Jack Ruby?
I knew Jack Ruby for approximately 4, 5, 6 months.
In what relationship?
I was employed as the feature at the Carousel Club.
What kind of a man was he?
Jack Ruby was a fanatic. He was a very nervous man, a very violent man. He would cause hassles and harassments and always running around, very energetic.
Would you say he had a violent streak in him?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yes, he would get carried away by something and lose all rational thinking. He would just go off, zoom, and just, he had to prove something. He had to be somebody.
There has been a statement by Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby's statement says simply, "I couldn't help it."
So Jack couldn't help it. Now, you can take that statement to mean that he was so distraught about the murder of his president and his empathy for Jackie Kennedy that he was compelled to have to take an act against Lee Harvey Oswald. And you can, think of it in those terms. But here's another way to look at it. He couldn't help it because he was a mafia guy. Let me just get this started. He was a mafia guy, and he was working for Carlos Marcello, and for whatever reason, he and Carlos had a problem. And so Carlos, who Jack Ruby may find himself in a cornered position because he owes him money, because one thing or another, organized crime people have a way of getting themselves sideways with each other. And, they have a propensity for violence and that sort of thing. So Jack Ruby may have found himself in a position where Carlos was telling him he had an assignment to go and kill this guy. And so, I couldn't help it. Yeah, he couldn't help it. I mean, that scenario seems to me a little more plausible than this psychopath who is compelled because he is so compassionate with Mrs. Kennedy. Okay, let's see what happens. Jack gets arrested, he gets convicted, and he suddenly wants to talk about his experience, but he doesn't feel safe in Dallas. He doesn't feel safe. I wonder why he doesn't feel safe in Dallas. Maybe because the police, the sheriff, everybody is in bed with organized crime. Maybe that's why he doesn't feel safe there and he wants to go somewhere else so he can talk.
By the Monday evening, both Oswald and Kennedy had been buried and the inquests begun. All investigations focused on the lone gunman theory, and within 2 weeks, a detailed FBI report declared the guilt of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay, again, all investigations are focused on proving the guilt of Lee Harvey Oswald. That's not an investigation. That means go and cherry pick information that validates the conclusion we've already reached. An investigation goes out to follow leads, find evidence, ask questions, see where it goes, follow where it leads, but not here. Here we already got the conclusion. You're to go and find the conclusion, and the FBI issues its report within 2 weeks.
Secret Service reenactments supported their conclusions. In March the following year, sentence was passed on Jack Ruby.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder with malice as charged in the indictment and assess his punishment at death.
Meanwhile, the Warren Commission, charged by President Johnson to find the truth, operated almost entirely in secret. Based in Washington, the commissioners finally came to Dallas. Their spokesman was former CIA Director Allen Dulles.
Are you convinced that he was shot from the school book depository?
Well, I think we better leave all that, the evidence report will cover all of that, and we'll get into that, but that question might lead to a lot more, and
Earl Warren, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, also came with Commissioner Gerald Ford, a future president. The prime purpose of their visit was to interview Jack Ruby, who had appealed against his sentence. A frightened man, he claimed he could not talk freely in Dallas and begged 8 times to be taken to Washington to testify. The commissioners left, ignoring his pleas.
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives. The people that had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in will never let the true facts come above board to the world.
Now, these people are in very high positions, Jack?
Yes.
The Warren report concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, killed President Kennedy. Incarcerated in his cell overlooking Dealey Plaza for another 2.5 years, Jack Ruby suddenly contracted cancer and died at Parkland Hospital. With his silence permanently guaranteed, Ruby's body was flown to Chicago, the place of his birth, for burial. Only now, a quarter of a century after the president's death in Dallas, is the appalling truth behind his assassination and its cover-up revealed.
So Jack says, look, I want to talk to you. And there are very powerful people who will be implicated in what I have to say, but Chief Justice Warren, you got to take me to Washington. He says it 8 times. And Warren says, well, it's a little bit complicated, Lee. We'd have to get you to Washington. Moving you is going to be difficult, blah, blah, blah. And, that's why we came here, because we don't want to take you there. Get this one ready. I said, but I'm here. And so Jack Ruby doesn't get to go to Washington. He gets to find that he has cancer, and he dies shortly thereafter. Jack, this isn't the only thing that Jack is associated with in relation to the murder. He's also seen at Parkland Hospital and is alleged to have been the person who dropped the magic bullet on Connolly's stretcher.
As a lawyer, not as a witness, I wasn't there. I can tell you what people said, but I want to present witnesses. They said no.
I am convinced beyond any question of a doubt that the first shot that was fired did not hit me. Then I was hit.
The official government position was that Lee Harvey Oswald had fired only 3 bullets in 5.6 seconds from the 6th floor of the depository. One of the bullets, according to these commission drawings, hit the president in the head. Another missed and hit James Tague standing below the triple underpass. This meant that for the government's 3-shot position to stand up, one bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, had to have gone through both President Kennedy and Governor John Connally. This almost intact bullet, one that ballistically matched Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano, was accidentally found in a stretcher at Parkland Hospital.
You might have among the shooters some individuals who were unsophisticated in their other talents and limited to, say, the shooting, which appears to be the case. But in Jack Ruby, they had the triple hat man, and one of the functions, I'm satisfied, was dropping that pristine bullet, number 399, if I recall, onto the right stretcher.
Jack Ruby denied to the Warren Commission that on the day of the assassination he was in either Parkland Hospital or Dealey Plaza, although 2 reputable eyewitnesses told the commission they saw Ruby in Parkland, and although a Willis photograph shows Ruby in Dealey Plaza, the commission accepted Ruby's denial. If one shot, the commission knew, had missed altogether and the other hit the president in the head, it meant in order for the commission's case against Oswald to hold up, this one magic bullet had to cause the president's neck wound and all the wounds to Governor Connally. Garrison said that in proving this magic bullet theory developed by Arlen Specter, the commission came up with some of its most creative drawings. This is the commission drawing which explains, according to the government, how Exhibit 399 did all the damage. The bullet, according to the commission's drawings, went through the president's neck without striking a bone, deflected, then entered into Connally's back, smashing 4 inches of his 5th rib, came out under his right nipple, deflected down, demolishing the large bones in his right wrist, then deflected left, embedding in his left thigh. It stayed there until it got to Parkland Hospital, where it fell out onto a stretcher intact.
Okay, so again, I look at these video clips that I'm showing. This is the evidence that I want to present, and the thesis is that the story we're told is the most bizarre conspiracy theory that that we have been told, and that the whole story is utter nonsense. That anyone who has been involved in an investigation of anything knows that when you get all of these bizarre occurrences, that that there's a lot more to the story, that people need to be questioned, evidence needs to be examined, needs to be gathered. There's evidence hasn't been gathered. Why not? Why didn't they? Why was the crime scene never defined a crime scene? I mean, this is, and why? Because we were going to rush to get to case closed. And if I was the assassination manager and orchestrating all of this, that is my key. My key objective is to kill the president. My second key objective is to get to case closed. And they do it. I mean, it is a marvelous job. It is a very well done orchestrated crime. And but for as an investigator, if I was working on that, and you're going to tell me we need to conclude this report in 2 weeks, are you kidding? With all that, this was a Mafia hit, and you're going to, this requires serious investigation. But I want you to know that in my view, this mirrors the discussion today about January 6th. That it didn't happen. These were just tourists. This was a normal day at the Cap. Are you kidding? I mean, see, if you could get away with this lie, with the murder of a president, you can lie your way through anything. It suggests that you can do outrageous things and simply pretend that it didn't happen. And so as I look, I want to just go over the materials that I had sent you last week at the close. That when we start reviewing all of here, this is my list of things. There's more, but this is kind of a condensed list of the highlights. They killed Kennedy at the only spot along the motorcade that was suitable for an ambush. He has clearly an entry wound through his throat from the front. He has another bullet wound from the front right side of his head that clearly jerks his head back. We have evidence that quickly appears so that police are led to a conclusion, such as the receipt for the purchase of the alleged murder weapon. We don't, we don't have ballistics. Okay, let me. We don't have ballistics that connects the bullet, the weapon, and the alleged shooter. We have the murder of a Dallas police officer for no apparent reason other than a distraction. We have a paraffin test that's returned negative on Oswald, suggesting he did not fire a weapon that day. We have no fingerprints on the alleged weapon, only a palm print that appears after Oswald was killed and after the police show up at the funeral home before Oswald is buried. Then we get a palm print. We have a photo of Oswald holding the alleged weapon. Again, a piece of evidence that's planned and planted. We have a pristine bullet that allegedly killed Kennedy and hit Connolly. We get an anonymous tip 15 minutes after the shooting, providing a description of Oswald. And then 15 minutes later, okay, we have Oswald's route to the Texas theater involves this inexplicable detour so that he can go over and shoot Officer Tippit. Mind you, we have a weapon on Oswald, but we don't have ballistics connecting that weapon to the bullet that killed Tippit. We do not have a legitimate autopsy. We don't have ballistics connecting the bullets with the weapons, with the shooter. We have eyewitnesses who are disputing events at the crime scene. We have medical staff disputing the botched autopsy reports. We have emergency room doctors disputing botched autopsy reports. We have Oswald's work as a squared-away Marine at an air base for top secret missions. We also have Oswald participating in intelligence operations in Japan, separate from the U2 activities. We have Oswald's defection to the Soviet Union, claiming that he will divulge top secret information, only to return years later without criminal accountability. Nothing says an intelligence agent clearer than that. Oswald's attempt to renounce his citizenship, but his fail. Mind you, this isn't a spontaneous impulse buy. This is, I'm going to go and renounce my citizenship. And he's told, you got to come back Monday to sign the papers, but he doesn't come back. So what we get is a seer, and then we get Jack Ruby, who performs a hit. Oswald is killed in a hit. And you're going to conclude this investigation in 2 weeks? It's just not serious. Okay, with that, Lauren, we can open up for discussion.
Okay, here we go. We will use the raise the hand function so that people can ask questions, tell Sal that he's nuts, or whatever you want to do. And fire away, folks.
Robert's iPad.
If Oswald was such an accurate shooter, does that mean that he intended to shoot him through the neck? Why not through the head?
I don't believe Oswald shot him at all.
Well, I mean, if we're going along with the accepted explanation.
Well, that he would have been aiming for his head, I would think. But again, the trajectory of the bullets don't coincide with that. It shows him, if anything, it shows him shot in the back, lower on the back, which would have been hitting the torso and presumably tearing up his heart and that kind of thing. It could have been a fatal shot, right?
But the reason to shoot
I would have shot for the torso simply because it's a bigger target than trying to aim in on his head. And mind you, he's shooting him as the vehicle is moving away from him. So allegedly, again, I don't believe Oswald shot him, but if he was, I think it more likely would have shot as the vehicle was approaching him, because the target gets bigger, not smaller, and as it goes away, it gets smaller. So again, it doesn't, the circumstances don't add up. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in before anybody else and ask, where did they get that girl that worked at the club who said he was crazy and
right, he had hit her, and so he had abused her, and that's how they were able to identify her as a possible witness.
Okay. Dave, can you unmute yourself?
Actually, I can do the old-fashioned one. Yeah, there's one little thing that bothers me.
One?
Just one?
Regarding your presentation.
Oh, okay.
I've known of certain people in jail who kind of like a road trip to get out of where they are and want to go someplace else. And if you say publicly, I need to get out of here because something's going to happen to me, well, then something would have happened to him in jail before this really happened. I mean, you know, once you already said that, the powers that be are going to make that you have no more power. So.
And he suddenly contracted cancer and was dead within a couple of weeks. So when he says, hey, I want to talk, he winds up dead in a very short period of time.
Was an autopsy done on him?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
That question has come up, but I don't know if there was or not. There is discussion on the Mary Farrell Foundation page with where researchers, have done stuff where they have written essays that say that what he died of wasn't something that could have been introduced as a poison or whatever, that it was a condition that was there for a while, he didn't know it, blah, blah, blah. And so he legitimately dies of cancer. But again, it's to me, it's suspicious. At best, it would say that the people who were then going to kill him said, hey, look, he's going to die in a couple of weeks anyway, let him go. He's not going to have a chance to talk. So they just let him expire that way. But so, yeah, I think once he said he wanted to talk, he was, it's like Jeffrey Epstein. Once Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, they weren't going to let him live too much longer. He had too much on too many people. And if Ruby did have that kind of information, you would think he would have been subject to the fate that Lee Harvey Oswald was subjected to. Sure.
And the information may have not been involved for Kennedy, but it could involve about other stuff he knew.
Sure. Go ahead, Bill.
You got something?
Yeah, I did find an autopsy report on Jack Ruby. He died, or at least a doctor says he died as a result of a pulmonary embolism secondary to lung cancer. But one would have thought that lung cancer would have been identified more than 2 weeks before he passed away, normally. But maybe back in that day it was different. Huh?
So he has an aneurysm and dies.
Yeah, an embolism, a blood clot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When you get involved in assassination activity, it does things that will make your head explode. And Jack Ruby proves
it. Yeah. So there's two things that I'm like you. I'm convinced that the shots that killed Kennedy probably came from the front, not from the back. So you had a plot to do the killing, and then you had a clear plot to cover the whole thing up. Now you could have passed the former off to the Mafia, Carlos Marcello or somebody like that. You could have said those guys did all that on their own. However, they had no way, the mechanism to cover all that stuff up. Did they?
No. That would take someone like me to orchestrate it. If I had if I had the connections and the power and all of that.
Yeah, but you'd have to be you'd have to be close to the federal. You'd have to be close to the FBI for sure to pull that off. Close to the local police. So you had to fool the FBI, the local police. You either had to fool them or be in cahoots with them to make that happen.
Well, and forgive me if I'm interrupting you, just on that point, though, is that all I need is J. Edgar Hoover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because once the president says, Edgar, we don't want to have an international incident. You guys need to conclude this case quickly. Now, I have delivered to you a suspect and a lot of evidence. So J. Edgar can then say, hey, we know we got the right guy and we know he's dead. So there's no need to keep investigating. And once J. Edgar tells the FBI, go out and find the evidence that validates that Oswald did it, they snap to attention, salute, and say, yes, sir, we go forth and find the evidence to support that conclusion. That's all I need. As long as You know, in the beginning, I talked about framing things. If the way to manipulate an investigation is frame it. It's like Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice. We're going to investigate this sexual assault, but you can only interview these 4 people. See, that's not an investigation. That means I framed it in a way that I'm going to put you in a straitjacket. You can only find the information I want you to find. So the FBI goes forth, and they find the evidence to support that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. And within 2 weeks, they've concluded their job. Now, if J. Edgar Hoover said, we need to go and investigate this, Sal Depasquale, you're my chief agent to orchestrate this investigation. Now I'm going to start it with who might have wanted to kill your husband, coming up with those names. And then we start with, I would want, what's all the evidence from the crime scene? What do we have as an autopsy? All of that would be things that would have been a part of the investigation. Not, let's just go find the evidence that supports that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. So all of those, you don't have to have all of those, you don't have to bribe and compromise all the agents. The only person who's got to be on board is J. Edgar.
Bill, Elsie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about the killing of Oswald. I had thought Ruby was behind Oswald, but the shot was in his eye.
In his stomach. He was shot in his stomach. The bullet enters Oswald's stomach. Yeah. From the front.
Who was shot in the eye? That's what the autopsy said, I believe.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
And someone saw Ruby shoot him. Is that correct?
Right.
We all saw it.
Captured on TV.
Yeah. Okay.
All on film.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you were watching the JFK funeral, you saw Oswald be shot.
So they buried JFK 2 days after he was assassinated?
Was it? No, it wasn't.
No.
I can't remember what it was. Yeah, it
They were
was pretty quick.
They were taking him from the White House, the body from the White House to the Capitol when Oswald was shot. Because I remember as a kid, we were sitting around. I think it was around lunchtime, because as I recall, we were watching the thing and eating TV dinners or something like that when it happened.
Date of burial, November 25th, 1963. 3 days
quick.
later.
Yeah.
So that
That's
was really
quick.
fast too. They got JFK buried very quickly, I feel, relative to what we know about state funerals now. Coral? Oh, need to unmute Coral.
Quick question. What happened to Marina? Did she ever have anything to say?
She stayed in the U.S. and I think there was a recent story about her. She, I don't think she ever made any comments about his being an intelligence or not an intelligence. But it was, they had a child and she really wanted to, not bring attention that would affect the child. So she was pretty low profile. There was a book written by an author who was, very sympathetic and and that kind of thing. But that's about it that I know of. Yeah.
I think her daughter's name was June, and you can look them up online. There is information out there about them.
Yeah.
Kay?
If this was a planned assassination, why was it so sloppy?
I think I see it as really well done. I mean, it's you know, mind you, I think they get 2 bullets into Kennedy, both of which are kill shots, and they wind up eliminating the suspect within 2 days. I think it's a very, and they have thrown in enough distractions and complications and evidence to lead to a suspect in such a way that the case is closed within 2 weeks. I think that's a very good job. I think that's a pretty effective.
We have all these questions.
Oh, but that's just it. I know they can't be answered because there's no evidence. Once the evidence is gone, you know, once they didn't interview the people needed to, it doesn't matter. You can ask all the questions you want. You're never going to bring it back to the people who are actually behind it. So I would consider it a successful job. I would give them a raise. but you know, it's, mind you, I've got, in the end, the Warren Commission has said what I wanted them to say. I have loads of people in the press who are saying what I want them to say, and the person I wanted to assassinate is dead, and the suspect who I set up is dead. And I would also think that maybe the people who actually fired the shots may be dead. If I was investigating it, I would have wanted the names of everybody who died the day before, the day of, and the day after. So, you know, that may be the case. Yeah.
Okay.
Elaine?
Hi, Saul.
Hi.
I was just wondering, has anybody mentioned your PSA yet on TV? I've seen it a couple of times. Has anyone mentioned it yet?
I haven't seen it. George played it in one of our classes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just
really
wanted
excellent.
to add how happy I was to see it and what a great job you did. And
Well,
congratulations and thank you for your volunteer work.
Well, thank
And
you.
if
Thank you so
anyone
much.
hasn't seen it,
Thank you.
Sal has done a PSA for Meals on Wheels Atlanta, and it's excellent. And if you don't have time to volunteer, you can certainly donate.
Yes.
Well, thank you for mentioning it. You know, it's a little bit embarrassing, really. I really thought the commercial was going to be about the people I was delivering to. And, you know, they had asked me, you know, to participate and to identify people that we could go. And I picked people who I knew were kind of personalities that I thought would really, you know, capture people's hearts and that kind of thing. And so they produced the commercial, and then, you know, I saw it like a day before it was released, and it's all about me. And I was like, this, what? This was kind of not what I had expected, but hopefully it'll do some good. That I'm told that when the Olympics were in Seattle, NBC did a similar thing for Meals on Wheels there, and they raised about $5 million. So,
wow.
you know, that could be a huge amount of money for the organization. So, but thanks for mentioning. Yeah.
Mary, I think your hand was up next.
Well, I'm coming in with a little frivolity, so I kind of wanted to go at the end. The frivolity is that one of my colleagues decades ago said that on the day that Kennedy was shot, her daughter came running home from school and said, "Mommy, Mommy, Kennedy's been shot." And they said Nixon did it.
You know, here's here's a thing. During Watergate, Nixon is listening to the tapes. This is before this is when he decides to resign. And this has been written about in a couple of different books. And he listens to a tape. Some of the Watergate burglars included people who were involved in the Bay of Pigs. And so Nixon hears himself on the tape talking about the burglars, and he says, there's no way they can connect this to the Bay of Pigs. And it's at that time that he goes to his lawyer, St. Clair, and says, I'm resigning.
Coral?
Why do you suppose Ruby never made more of a statement as to who was behind his activities?
Why should he? Well, I think he, I think, to Dave's point, which was if he indicates he's going to talk, he knows he's going to be a prime target. And so I think when he knows, he has been convicted and sentenced to life in prison. He has appealed and he's going to get a new trial, but he is, there's a thing that happens for a lot of those guys when they become incarcerated. The reality hits them and they suddenly want to see if they can do something to change that status. And so he decides he's going to talk. He wants to reveal stuff, and he gives an indication. It can implicate very powerful people high up. So it's like this is his last chance. If anything, I think he's gambling that if he gets moved to Washington, he would have federal protection that would take him out of the protection of the Dallas and state law enforcement authorities, and that he might have a chance of survival. But if he's still within that environment, his chances are nil.
Yeah. But actually the feds
He's dying anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and the feds weren't any happier to hear from him anyways. Eileen?
Yes, I just wanted to say a little bit about the Meals on Wheels and our our cell, because a couple of years you were on of the all the land, and you have a trophy. I think you should put it behind you so everybody could see what a great guy you are.
Well, in case you didn't hear Eileen, because it kind of broke up there, Sal was Volunteer of the Year for Atlanta, and he has a lovely trophy and everything. It's really cool.
Well, look, for anybody who's has the ability to do it, volunteering an hour a week really has a huge impact. And Meals on Wheels is very considerate of volunteer time. They do not waste volunteers' time at all. They have everything ready to go. It's easy to do, and it's really important. Anyway, so great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what other questions do we have out there?
Well, I have questions for my lawyers. From an investigator, I mean, if you were defending Oswald, wouldn't this be a lot of material you'd want to wrap your arms around? I just think there's a strong case to say he had nothing to do with this thing.
Yeah, I mean, the Tippett doesn't make any sense at all. There's no logical reason for him to kill Tippett. And, you know, now ironically, going to the movie theater, that was the thing that killed Dillinger.
Ah, yeah.
That was also orchestrated by the FBI.
Yeah, good one. Probably in a textbook somewhere, in a manual. Got to be in a manual, right?
Yeah.
Joy?
No, I'm just thinking everything makes so much sense. The only thing that to me makes sense with Ruby going ahead and doing it is if they had something on him, or if he knew he was sick and they made a huge donation to somebody close to him. Because otherwise, who was this? You know, why would a nightclub owner, you know, they're not known for their great patriotism. It just doesn't.
Or political savvy in that regard.
Some of them may be. But the Mafia certainly is very, and remember, the Mafia and the government have worked together before. They worked together during World War II. So it's not beyond the pale. There are those who think that the aim was really to get it at Robert Kennedy and they would try and through his brother, but I don't know that there's been ever any evidence to that effect. I know the Mafia hated him and Carlos hated him.
So did Johnson.
Carlos did make a jailhouse confession because he was subsequently on other things convicted and sentenced to prison, and the FBI placed an informant in the cell with him, and he tells the cellmate that he was behind the murder of Kennedy, but you know that stuff isn't all that credible, but that is documented. It's recorded and documented. Yeah.
But nobody ever looked further.
No.
It's also possible that Ruby was getting some family member was getting some payments, and for some reason the payment stopped, either because the family member died or because the payments just stopped, and he was pissed off about it.
Well, there's also look, when you take you make your pledge to organized crime, and I don't think Ruby would have been a MAID member, but for those who are MAID, they can be given an assignment and they have to fulfill it. And if they tell you got to go kill this person, you go kill them. And it could mean your arrest. It could mean you're going to be in prison. But the part of the deal, of course, is that if you are incarcerated, we'll take care of you in there. And we'll take care of your family, blah, blah, blah. But I think he would be at the status of an associate, but he would also be subject to the same requirement. So that could be possible. Yeah. Bill.
Yeah, on the Bobby Kennedy issue, there's probably no better way other than killing Bobby Kennedy. There's no other way to remove his power than to remove his brother, right? Because you've unplugged him. You've unplugged him from the power source, and there are probably a number of people who would have liked to have done that. The Mafia, J. Edgar Hoover would. J. Edgar Hoover and Bobby Kennedy didn't G and Hall very well either.
No, and it certainly, LBJ didn't like him at all. So, yeah, I mean, when you get involved in all those relationships, they were all, look, if you were investigating it and you were going to look for who might want to kill John Kennedy, there's a long list of names that come before Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, yeah.
Who would have the power and the capacity to do it. To think that this guy, you know, on an impulse, decided to buy a piece of garbage weapon that could not do what it was supposed to have done is really, in my mind, just absurd.
Yeah.
But it also, I think it's important to see the implications for the gall with which people today will simply spout forth lies as if they're telling, you know, the truth, and straight-faced. This is what we're living with now. And I think the Kennedy assassination was a key milestone in that process. Okay, well, we've come to the end of another uplifting day.
Feels so great.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. You know, we'll see y'all next week.
Yeah. So where are we going from here? Because Ruby's dead, Oswald's dead,
Right.
Kennedy's not doing very well.
Yeah, no, next week I have a few more videos that I want to show you that I think are interesting in the whole scheme of things. And then I left the time for people to discuss the broad picture or individual events, really leave it for more of a discussion. So, but I have a couple of more videos. There were other attempts to try to kill Kennedy, and there were Secret Service people who wanted to appear before the Warren Commission to talk about it, but the Warren Commission wasn't interested, and some of them had their careers cut short. So, I want to take a look at that too. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you.